Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And you're with Tina Nixon and Chris Wikaira. So Chris may be familiar to some of you. He's often a commentator on a number of the political shows through and across a number of media platforms. I've seen him as a guest on Q&A. You've been a guest on
Well, you're showing your age now.
He was a commentator on Māori TV on the night of the election. And he was a journalist at RNZ for how many years?
I wandered around different bits of Nanny State Radio for 17 years.
17 years.
Pretty much straight out of school.
Yeah. You would have followed a fairly close path then to Sean for that time.
He started off like you in print. So he was off doing newspapers and things, I think, and then went into TV3 when I was in Radio BOP in Tauranga. So that's in about the early mid-90s. Early 1990s.
Early 1990s, yeah. So we're all old radio
But we were both on Morning Report together and
that's right.
Created mischief there.
Yeah.
And more than me.
That's right. And you used to have the Māori segment just after 6:30, was it?
Well, that was when Mana News. When Mana News was contracted to provide, it was sort of news and culture and cultural stuff from a Māori perspective into just before the business news on Morning Report.
Yeah.
I did that, and from there I came back into Radio New Zealand. So I was working with Fox there for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's right. I see those are the history things that, have shaped our media over the years that people don't know. And media, and Mana Magazine's really only just folded. I think it's got a website left.
Yep, and what that morphed into was the eTangata website, where you see it's now basically an aggregate, a clearinghouse for all sorts of columnists, for all sorts of different views. So if I think a lot of our flock here would look at some of that and want to have an aneurysm, get a twitchy left eye. But there's some good considered stuff on there as well. Yeah,
and the other Māori station that I watch or read sometimes is Wātea, which I think is quite good.
Yeah, whether you agree with it or not, it's a voice that's there, and it's exactly the same principle as what the platform is here and what others is, and what we're seeing, particularly with what we have with blogs and the number of blogs that people are doing, the number of webinars and things that anyone can do it. Yeah. All you need is a phone.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Chris is also a personal friend of mine. Has a horse called the Hairy Big Bastard.
Yeah, Big Hairy Bastard.
Big Hairy Bastard.
Otherwise known as Irish.
He stands about at 17 too.
He's 17 too. He's got a bit of shire on him, so he's
a big boy.
Yeah, he's white as me.
He has a son who's Josh, who's working over in the vineyards in Marlborough, and a mum who's a scientist.
Yes.
And his dad passed many years ago, so so we've known each other for years because we met, I think, when I was doing Māori fisheries.
And I was doing, wider Māori issues at Mana News. So that'd be about 1997.
Yeah. And I had the Māori Affairs portfolio as well as fishing as a journalist, and so we got to be mates in that time. And of all of the subjects today, you will be a guest for all three of them: food, flying, and Māori.
100%. Absolutely. Sounds like a fine troika.
Well, it was really good because we had Jenny Anderson on from Wings Over Wairarapa, and their STEM program is just off the charts this year. She just kept going and going and going with all of the new things that they've got this year for kids.
That's so cool. Well, I'm a board member of the New Zealand Science Roadshow Trust, which puts the programs with the big truck trailer unit into primary schools. So it's trying to get that interest in. And also there is a program there of helping increase standards for science teachers in primary schools. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And that's the other thing about Chris. He's not just he owns his own PR company, but he's also one of these people who's giving back into the community too. And a lot of journalists stay independent, and that's fine. But you're like me. We're well into our communities and doing all sorts of stuff in all sorts of different places.
Once you get into your own business and you're doing something like consultancy, you've got the freedom to do that. I'm still very picky and choosy, and I'm still very careful. And, as you've probably talked about, in our world, particularly the Māori side of it, you've just got to be careful because you can have the perception of conflicts, even if they don't exist. But, hey, you've got to put sunlight on them. So I'm a bit picky and choosy about what I do, but
Yeah.
you know, the science thing was a bit of a no-brainer, really.
Yeah. And I certainly got a fairly wide portfolio of stuff that I'm interested in. Some of them are a bit conflicting sometimes. That's life. But you are right. Hey, look, we've just come through the election. It's been one of the more interesting and challenging elections to even work out just exactly what was going to happen. But I think one of the biggest surprises with the election was the emergence of these new young Māori voices, which have across... Reno lost his position in Te Tai Tonga.
Lost a seat.
Nanaia, who would have ever thought that would have happened? And I think there's some of the others on a bit of a knife edge still too.
Yeah, so Rawiri Waititi had won Waiariki off Labour last time. Debbie Ngāti Wapaka then tracked in on the special votes, and that's an important point that we'll come back to in a minute. So there's been 2 of them there in the last term. I thought they might pick up Te Tai Hauoru, which is basically runs from Porirua through the Manawatu right up into the King Country, you know, including Wanganui Taranaki. So it's a big electorate. I thought if Debbie was not going to win that this time, she was never going to win it, and she did. What we didn't pick was how big the turn was. It was sort of like a reversal of the majorities from last time.
It was.
You know, that's a very traditional Labour seat. It has the Ratana Church in the centre of it, pretty much. So a lot of the Ratana flock and faithful, known as the Morihu, are there. And yeah, you turned it. One of the things that they have done very well is they did in their space what Topham Guerin did for National and the social media. They've got a very strong, as the young people say, a very strong game. Very strong social media game.
Yeah.
And on the TikToks and that, and I found myself in one of those in the last week of the campaign. A couple of Mondays ago, we did the Waiariki candidates debate on Māori television, and I asked Rawiri Waititi the question of, do you think you should consider moderating some of your language? Because there are a lot of Māori who are on the general roll, a lot of Māori on the Māori roll who don't yet party vote for Te Pāti Māori. And some are uncomfortable with you saying things like, I'm not a big fan of democracy, or, you know, referring to, you know, our colonial history as being from terrorist government.
Yeah.
You know, people go, oh, that's a bit rough. And I got a very strong, unequivocal no, which was picked up by their social media team, and there I was as grumpy old matua on TikTok for the next few days in the lead up to the election, which is the first time I've ever been on that space, but that's all cool. But when you look, they improved their party vote a lot, but at 2.6%, that's still quite low, even for the number of eligible Māori voters. So I think, you know, I sort of proved my point, even if I got a bit of a hiding along the way.
Yeah. So essentially they're still not super popular, but the electorates to change the representation.
Yeah, and that is also a sign of grumpiness with Labour. Labour's campaign and its Māori manifesto for this election was pretty much the same as last time. We're just going to continue with the program. Now, that was really Chippy's policy bonfire.
Yeah.
And things like the Three Waters, well, you've talked about that a lot. You were involved in it. And I think the biggest problem with that, whether what they were trying to do was right or wrong, was it was too complicated. Complicated's hard to explain. Hard to explain is easy for others to make mischief on, rightly or wrongly again. And that's exactly what happened. I felt 2 years ago they were in trouble with the narrative and said to Willie Jackson, I said, bro, you're in trouble on this. If you don't get this narrative back, you've completely lost it. No, cuz we're okay. And then, you know, didn't turn out to be so. Underneath that was the appeal to the youth, the social media drive, everything that Debbie and Rawiri does. And whether you like him or not, he's an absolute great personality, and he's one of those guys. He's got joie de vivre. He's a force of personality. Bit of a force of nature, and he's got a very good team behind him, and a lot of that is his wife Kitty, John Tamahiri's daughter. And I had one of our old political stages, war horses of journalism days, Richard Harmon, said to me, and good old Richard tiki-toured all over the North Island and
his
all
coverage
about
was
the
the
country.
best. The best.
Yeah, old school beat the shoe leather out.
Yeah.
And he said, the thing I did notice, there were more Te Pāti Māori billboards across the Waiariki electorate than there were across the rest of the North Island.
Yeah.
And that was that team, that good infrastructure that's there, having done an election and having a really good supportive team.